we've got our collage in its first location using 360 still photo, nested sequences with VR plane to sphere, and matting those sequences inside the nest so that you can get more organic shapes. And then we made a transition to a different version of the same scene as a kind of an endpoint. But the next thing I want to introduce to you is that you can make your piece a series of multiple locations with collages. And if our inspiration is that Fossil Hunters in the Gobi piece, that's exactly what they do. They transition between multiple background scenes. And so I'm going to try another one as an excuse to use a couple other VR effects that could do some interesting things for us collage-wise. So I started this new one that I'm calling Portals, just internally for my own sakes, because I have grabbed a bunch of animated GIFs or GIFs, if you like. I don't want to get into any internet wars over pronunciation. And I found this, again, on Wikimedia Commons, a 360 image of a kind of ruins. And then I grabbed a bunch of animated GIFs of magic portals. And I want to kind of populate them through this space. But I want to show you a little bit of the process of working with animated GIFs, because I think these could be a cool and useful way of getting some movement into a 360 collage, but they take a little extra special care. I just searched these up on Google Image Search, downloaded them, threw them in a folder, and what I want to point out to you about animated GIFs is right here under frame rate. Very common for them to not be a typical video frame rate. With animation in general, it's not unusual to sort of knock down frame rate for the sake of the ease of animating. But you see, we've got a whole range of some rather peculiar frame rates here, and that is going to matter in terms of looping. So almost all of these GIFs want to loop or are very close to being loops, but not quite. So let me show you what I mean. This was my working method. Let me get back to where I haven't done it yet, and I'll show you what went down. I have this first portal. I drag a second version of it down, and I watch to see if it loops. And I noticed at the transition that there is this little herky jerk, right there. And I went through frame by frame to see why. What is that about? And I'll tell you, spoiler, it's about having a 9.09 frames per second frame rate. As you frame by frame through it, you'll see there's movement every third frame for the most part. So we go 1, 2, 3, and there was movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, and there was movement. 1, 2, 3, and there was movement. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're between 3s and 4s, and that's just math working this out into a 30 frames per second. But when I get close to the end here, right, let's find our last example of movement. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we went 2 and then 7. And that's why your eye is registering a sort of herk, or a jerk, or a herky jerk. Sorry, it's been a long tutorial making experience. I'm starting to get punchy. So here we go. We're gonna delete a couple of frames and then pull this in and see how we go. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. That's going to look a little more like the rest of the movement. Yeah. So that feels pretty good to me. So then what I do is I select this one that's lost 3 frames or something at the beginning, go right to the end of my clip with snapping on. And then if you highlight the video track here, V2, that you want to paste to, and make sure no other video track is highlighted at the same time, Premiere will paste to that track. So if you've ever had trouble where you like just by default you're pasting down here and you're like, wait, that's not what I wanted, you know, that's why. You have to highlight which one you're working on. Now I can just paste to my heart's content, and these are all going to loop as well as they can. So I did that to this one, all the ones I color coded blue. This one I found had I think it was the 20 frames per second one that had to lose a frame or two. Same with this one. So I'm literally just eyeballing this, and when I see it failing to loop, I'm going in frame by frame and seeing if I need to remove a frame or a couple to make it smoother. The other thing that can happen when you're trying to make perfect loops is there are some that just don't. They just don't. So this one, for example, if you put this together as a loop, here's what happens. Boom, it just jumps right back out. This one does not loop. It was never meant to. So the cheap way of getting something to loop, especially something abstract where it doesn't really matter if it goes in and out and in and out, is we can right click on the second one and speed and just reverse the speed. So now what we've got is we go to the end and then we come back out, and then we go to the end and then we come back out, and it has that kind of breathing looping quality. So now I've made a sort of perfect loop out of that one as well. The last kind of loop fixing that you might end up having to do is this kind. So this clip doesn't loop, but it also isn't going to look good in reverse, in my opinion, because it's going to change the direction of the rotation here, and it just looks like this magic molecule is like doing exercises to me or something. Like I don't want it to go clockwise and then counterclockwise. It just feels wrong. So instead of this, what I'm going to do is pull in a couple of frames on either end and put a cross dissolve between them, right? So that way the difference between the end frame and the beginning frame is sort of healed by the cross dissolve. This is the most painful one to do your copy and paste on, because you will have to do cross dissolves manually between every one. So the way I would set that up is, so now I've pulled in from the end on the first one, but not the beginning. So I don't copy this one because that's sort of a unique one. Then this one has pulled from the beginning, but not the end. So I'm going to trim this in a little bit. Now this is my copyable clip because it has lost frames at both the beginning and end. And then I can copy paste that. The reason we are doing that trimming, by the way, is you can't make a cross dissolve between clips right at their very end. It'll just freeze frame the clips because there's no extra heads or tails to work with. So now, you know, the semi-painful job of cross dissolving each of those transitions. And finally, I would have I would have perfect loops with all of these portals. Now, if you're following my train of thought from the Buffalo Rider montage or collage, the next step is going to be getting all these piles of looped clips off my timeline by selecting them and nesting them. So I'll call this one orbit. I'll call this one nest. That looks like a galaxy to me, you know, and I'm going to do on and on. Okay, I have all of these previously very clippy loops nested out into their own sequences. Even if we don't need to do matting or some other effect to those whole sequences, this just cleans up my timeline here. But we probably will go back into those sequences as well. But this is going to allow me to do my VR effects to one big sequence instead of to dozens and dozens of little looped GIFs. So we're going to do VR plane to sphere again, as is always my favorite. But this time, I want us to think a little bit about the geometry of the architecture. So last time we were using rotate projection a lot, but this time I'd like to introduce why you might use rotate source. And for that, I'm going to try to align these portals along some of our architectural lines. So now this is a funny job. You know, you've got to sort of work with all of these options at once to see what we can do. But, you know, it's one thing. Here we might be able to actually just like tuck this in into that space. Another one, perhaps we bring over and see if we can get on a diagonal somewhere. Yeah, like if I want that to align along there, I will never get it to do so just by rotating around here. I'm going to have to swing it out this way and then there. And now it looks a lot more like it's in that space. And so I'm going to do that and find little kind of like architectural homes for all of these portals, right? This one might actually be the portal that goes in that doorway. So let me make that happen and then we'll talk again. Now, in my case, the one other thing I'd like you to be aware of is all of these screens now look very screen-like. You know, it's like someone dropped a billboard into this space. And we can create a kind of faux 3D effect by using that rotate source like I have here and here to kind of make them appear like they're sitting in space at an oblique angle. But if we don't want some of these to look like billboards, if I actually want them to feel more like a magic portal, then a quick way to try to blend these things together is using the blend modes that change how light and color are handled. So in my case, I have a lot of images that have dark backgrounds, and I'm going to try some of these. See this little, like, these are kind of broken into categories here. The first ones here all make the colors kind of darker. they prioritize the darker colors. So I'm going to try the lighter colors and see what we have to work with. Each of these handles color and light a little differently. Some of them are going to be better or worse for different footage. That one I kind of like for that piece of footage. And then I'm just going to go down the line and kind of try these out. Okay, now what once might have looked a little, I don't know, plopped on there has suddenly, through just those two methods, kind of using faux 3D geometry and getting them to blend into the background, this suddenly I feel like looks a lot more convincing. And as we watch these things animate in perfect loops, now we've kind of created a magic temple out of this. That's probably the cheesiest one, out of this space. And then this was an idea I was toying with to think, okay, if I've made a bunch of portals, what if I have them transport us somehow to another space? So we go from the kind of ancient to, this was another image I found on Wikimedia Commons. It's sort of like a media museum in India, I think. And so I was just thinking about the possibility of a more visually eye-catching transition, like a sort of portal-like transition between these two spaces. Okay, now that's sort of outside the realm of what I would normally say is good taste, but I'm here I am making magic portals in a Lord of the Rings fantasy land, so why not? Why not go with VR light rays for now? But basically what I'm trying to show you is that using just some of what comes as options inside our VR effects, you can create really interesting geometric environments that make your viewer feel like these things are truly floating in space. So what I'd like you to do is go looking for inspiring source material that you can find online and start building your collage with these tools, and see what you can convince us of, see what realities you can build just with still images, video clips, animated GIF loops, and the VR effects that are available in the box in Premiere.